Alrighty guys, hi, it's Amanda. I am back for my intro to my experience in makeup series. In this particular intro video, I am not going to be doing my makeup. I already have it done, and this is going to be a shorter video for the ones to come. This is more of an informative video to kind of set people up to know what is going to be discussed moving forward. So I do want to place a trigger warning here and a disclaimer. Throughout this series in this video, I will be referencing abuse and neglect of children. There won't be any examples or in-depth talk of that during this video, but there will be in the upcoming videos. This video is just really to explain to people what the process is to typically become a child in state custody. Keep in mind the information that I'm providing today is going to be how the system works today in Florida. 30 years ago it was slightly different than what it is now. Laws have changed for the better. Of course, there is still room for growth. There always is. But I'm not really going to focus on those. This is more just an informative way to set up for my series. Just in case somebody who is watching this may not know much about foster care. They may just know of foster care and not really know what it pertains or how you get there, information like that. So I may reference me and when I went in, but it won't be my exact story. That's going to be in the upcoming parts. So I am going to be reading from some notes just to try and make it streamlined. From my last video, it was a pointer that I had from some family and friends. So I'm going to try and do that. I'm also going to try and limit my fidgeting. I can't promise that. Again, this is only the second video and still rather new to this and just feeling it out. So the main thing is people don't fully know the situation of how CPS shows up to somebody's door. Some people know, some don't. So typically the process is any individual, it doesn't have to be family, it doesn't have to be friends, it could be somebody at the grocery store even, who just witnesses a scenario, a situation, no matter what it may be, that they believe the child is being abused, neglected, or abandoned. And there are different forms of abuse and neglect. Most people, when they think of abuse, they think of physical abuse. Obviously, there are more forms of abuse than that. There's emotional abuse. There are things considered abuse and neglect that relate to if the child has any diagnoses that aren't being tended to. Neglect can be a wide range of things. It can be not providing the appropriate shelter, not providing appropriate necessities for human life. So things do come in a broad spectrum. And I say that because everything's situational. I don't want anybody to take the information that I am providing and go out into public and see something and think, oh, that's abuse, I have to figure something out and call the hotline. That's not at all what I am saying. You don't want to make false allegations or accusations, but if you have any information that you've experienced hands-on or you have witnessed hands-on, then of course I would encourage you to make sure you notify the appropriate agencies. But that is where it starts, is somebody may know of something, may see something, and they call that state or that area. It differs from place to place. They call the hotline, which is something that is easily Googleable for wherever you're at. And they call it in, they discuss it with someone on the other line and say the situation. They will gather a ton of information about the family, about what you have concerns about. From that point, it has to meet a threshold. Just because you have concerns doesn't necessarily mean that to that state it raises to a level where they believe the children or child are in danger. It can be frustrating at times, but that is something to kind of be aware of. So once it is called in, if it does meet that threshold, then it is sent out to that area for investigation. And an investigator will go out, typically known as CPS, will go out with those allegations that were called in. Keep in mind that is just an allegation. They don't hold that information as true. They take that information and they investigate that. And in addition to that, it is typically protocol for them to also investigate any form of abuse or neglect that may be occurring in that house. And it's not just based off of what the family is going to tell them. It's a full-blown investigation, just like law enforcement conduct their investigations and contact different sources. Typically, that is how an investigation is done for child protection as well. From that, it is then, from all of the information gathered, if there is concern that the child or children are being abused, neglected, or abandoned, then it is going to go to the next level. Just because there's suspicion for it doesn't mean that, right away they're gonna just take those kids and leave. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Once they have gathered that, there are multiple steps in moving forward for it to be official. So if there is enough concern that something is ongoing and it is in front of you and you can see it as an investigator, you have the right, depending on what state you live in, to remove those children immediately. However, that is not a long-term it's not a long-term situation. It's not just up to the investigator. It goes through multiple levels. So say there is a situation and the children are in danger, actively in danger, and the CPS worker removes the child from the home. They will almost immediately contact a judge. It doesn't mean it's going to go in front of a judge, but it is contacted through some lawyers on what the situation is to see if you have any validity to a legal stance on what your concerns are. If it does meet that threshold and the attorneys and the lawyers agree that this is an unsafe situation, it is heard in front of a judge within 24 hours. Again, this is going to depend on your state and how they operate. I am referring to Florida. So from there, it is seen in front of a judge, and you would have to provide all of your information as to why you think those children cannot be either in the care of those parents or in that living environment, whatever it may be. You have to present that to the judge. And if the judge agrees that there is probable cause, then the judge will agree that the children need to remain out of the home. Once that occurs, it is then an ongoing process, typically for about a year, for the parents to rectify the situation or fix what they have going on. It could happen quicker than that, and it could take a little bit longer. Again, it's going to depend on the situation and where the family's at. Throughout that year, though, the children are always allowed to see their parents, and it's not necessarily at the parents' discretion, but it is important for children to try and maintain those relationships. Unpopular belief, but from my experience in child welfare, it is their goal to reunify the family, to provide that child back to those parents or back in a better situation. It's not the goal to, have these children in care. It's not anybody's intention from what I have experienced. During that year, though, the children are able to see their parents, given that the parents are willing to accommodate. And, and they are being tended to because they obviously have experienced trauma. It may not have been from the trauma that was found to have been occurring for abuse and neglect to have been provided with probable cause, but it is often traumatic for children to be removed from the home that they've known or the parents or the caregivers that they know. So even if the child is young enough or younger and doesn't understand that they may be in a situation where they are in danger or they are unsafe, it's traumatic for them to have to leave the home that they've been in. There are different situations though. Sometimes the children can remain in the home and other family members and friends can help. Sometimes the children go to family and friends. Unfortunately, in my situation, that was not a possibility, which is why I was a ward of the state for as many years as I was. And again, it's typically a year-long process, and those are newer laws that didn't exist when I was growing up. I was in the system for 10 years, and we'll get into that as my story develops and is told. But that is an overview of what it is to get into state's care. It all starts with abuse and neglect or abandonment. And from there, it's going to go forward. And it's not based off of one person. Of course, there are situations where the parents are, or legal guardians are in control of the situation and just can't handle it. Abandonment is the main one. Parents who, are unable to care for their child, and they just bring them to the state, or there's typically a process to that nowadays, but you see older movies or things like that of babies being left on the fire department's doorstep. Things like that still occur to this day. It's just not as commonly known about, but that is a form of abuse and neglect, obviously. So in those situations, they're handled a little bit differently because there's not a parent actively there caring for the child or putting the child in danger, although the situation itself is dangerous. So those are handled a little bit differently. But overall, in order for a child, I guess to wrap it up and go through it quickly, in order for a child to become in custody of the state through foster care is going to be the result of abuse or neglect from their caregivers, which could be the environment that they're living in. So from that, it then will, if there's any validity to the concern that was called in or that was being investigated, it then will go through the legal steps for the child to actually be in state's care. And depending on the situation, the child may be in state's care with relatives, or the child may be in state's care with a singular parent, or if there is no options and everything has been exhausted, the child will go into foster care. And foster care is typically either a home or a group setting without anybody you know. They do try to keep siblings together nowadays. Unfortunately, as we get into my story, my siblings that I had biologically were a lot older than me, but not old enough. So I was the only one taken in my situation. But that's how it operates. And again, I don't want anybody to be fearful. If you are in the system, it's not all bad. It does get better. And everything always happens for a reason. It's hard to believe that parents will put their children in unsafe environments or unsafe situations. However, it happens every day, more than you probably realize. And it is very sad, and it is a hard topic to talk about. But these children, such as myself growing up, all have the ability to be whoever they want to be and to do whatever they want to do. And I don't want people to think that because I'm sitting here in front of you and I'm just talking about the basics that, and I seem fine, that everything's fine. It's not always fine. Some children handle what they have experienced or are experiencing very differently. As I tell my story, you will understand kind of what has assisted me and sculpted me to be able to have the voice that I'm trying to have today and to try and advocate for these children. Again, this was just an introduction. It was just informative for individuals who may not know how getting into foster care works and the process of that. It of course is more lengthy than I described. There is more legal aspect to it than I can describe. I'm not an attorney, so I could by no means try to explain that situation. I am going to try in the next few series of this to not make it so disheartening. I know at some points it's going to be impossible for it to maybe not be emotional to listen to some people, and in those situations I would advise not to watch it. It is going to be overall relatively easy to listen to, and like I said, I will put in trigger warnings for people and disclaimers before I discuss things that may be harder for others to handle. But overall, I don't believe any of what I have experienced is enough to fully trigger somebody. But again, I handle with things like this a little bit differently. But I appreciate all of the time that you have provided me, and I look forward to moving on in this series. I am not exactly sure on the date that I will have part 1 uploaded, and part 1's probably going to be the least interesting, just because it'll be from my younger childhood, and I don't fully remember it, so a lot of that's going to be based off of what I have read and I have been told by others from my documents. So I don't imagine that one will be very long. And then moving on, I'm going to try and make the videos about 10 to 15 minutes long, maybe slightly longer, just depending on where I'm at in the story, because we have 30 years to go through. But I believe in the long run, hopefully this is going to be somewhat inspirational and somewhat informative to those who are curious or haven't really ever met somebody who's been through the system, just to give some enlightenment to those. But I hope you are having a good day or evening or night, wherever you are, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I don't think I'm going to edit any of this. There was a couple of times when I know I kind of slugged off a little bit, but not enough to where I believe I need to try and learn editing quite yet. Hopefully my next bit will be a little bit more smooth going. I am going to be probably doing my makeup as I discuss the further topics, as those are going to be easier for me to relax discussing such sensitive information. So this was just an intro, an informative kind of clip of what is the background of how things operate, and come to the situation I'm going to be discussing for myself. And other news, I will also be doing probably here and there some other little random videos in between the series. I'm not intending to do an upload on my parts every single day. I do intend to kind of do some other videos in the mix, just so it's not so serious. So I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions or if I didn't discuss something thoroughly enough for you, be sure to leave it in the comment section and let me know. I am looking forward to starting this series with you, and I hope you all are going to have a great day, evening, or morning. I will talk to you later.